You're not my dad.
If you put Dean Winchester at the same table as any other hunter from pop culture, sooner or later you hit on a conclusion that's kind of obvious. He's just human, but he lives on a scale that makes zero sense for a regular human being. Comparing him to John Wick, Van Helsing, Constantine, or any of the others is interesting, but in my opinion, you always get the nagging feeling that Dean's playing in a different league altogether. Not because he's got classic superpowers, but because this guy's body, mind, and soul have been pushed to limits that any real doctor, psychologist, or scientist would look at and say, this dude shouldn't even be in one piece, or alive at all. And that's exactly what makes Dean's anatomy so absurd and so damn fascinating to break down. Physically, Dean was born like any other kid in Lawrence, Kansas back in 1979, but his body never got the luxury of living a normal life. From childhood, he was turned into a tool of war because of his old man's obsessive mission. While other kids were playing in the yard, Dean was learning to shoot, to assemble a gun, to spot creature sounds in the woods, to sleep light enough to wake up at any weird creak in the motel. That shapes a body. His posture, the way he walks, the weight in his shoulders, it all screams a lifetime of carrying way more than he should have. Weapons crates, guns, duffel bags, his baby brother, and on top of all that, a responsibility that weighs more than any sawed-off shotgun. He doesn't have a bodybuilder's physique, but he's got the body of someone who's always ready to throw down, always tense, always on the edge of exploding into action. When you analyze Dean's biological base, the first thing that jumps out is his endurance. The number of times this guy's been beaten to hell, stabbed, shot, run over, thrown into walls, dragged by monsters, and kept right on getting back up is comedy-level ridiculous. If you looked at his medical file, his chart would be a phone book, thick fractured bones, deep cuts, concussions, and trauma that would put any normal person on bed rest for months. But Dean's back on the road within days, sometimes within hours. You can bet that in terms of adaptation, his body learned to respond to damage like it's on autopilot. Adrenaline dump, pain management through habit, muscles conditioned to keep running even when they're beat to crap. He doesn't regenerate like some mutant, but he functions like a guy who normalized the impossible. And that's just the realistic side of things. Once Dean dies and ends up in hell, the conversation shifts to another level entirely. 40 years of torture down there isn't just a footnote in his resume, it's a complete reconfiguration of his emotional and psychological anatomy. It's like his mind got taken apart and reassembled thousands of times over. For 30 years straight, he gets his ass handed to him, cut, torn open, burned, humiliated. Then, for 10 years, he flips to the other side and becomes the torturer, doing to others what was done to him. That leaves a mark that doesn't show up on an X-ray, but it defines the way he moves, reacts, and thinks. Nightmares, flashbacks, silent breakdowns, that hollow look in his eyes when someone brings up anything. Hell adjacent, it's all part of his mental muscle, trauma turned into survival instinct. When Dean crawls back from hell, he's not just an experienced hunter anymore. He's someone who knows exactly what's waiting on the other side if he dies again. That shifts his physical behavior in ways that are subtle and brutal at the same time. He throws himself into dangerous fights with a kind of reckless courage, but at the same time, he carries this silent fear about dragging other people into the same kind of hell he endured. His body becomes the barrier between the world and that abyss. Over and over, he literally puts himself between people and incoming blows, explosions, monsters, like his automatic reflex is just, I can take it, they can't. Dean's anatomy at that point isn't just strong muscles, it's decades of conditioning, telling him his job is to be a meat shield for whoever's behind him. Dean's mind is a whole different chapter. On the surface, he's the classic funny guy, rock fan, joke machine, ladies' man, the kind of dude who uses humor to cut through tension. On the inside, he's a labyrinth of guilt, abandonment issues, swallowed rage, and an almost sick need for control. From childhood, he was trained to take orders, to bottle up emotion, to put the mission and his brother above everything else. That builds a brain that works like radar. He walks into a room and, without thinking much about it, he's already mapped out exits, clocked potential threats, marked suspicious faces. He reads people constantly, picks up on lies, fear, nervousness, hostile intent. It's not a superpower. It's the result of growing up in a world where letting your guard down means you're dead. Dean's brain is always in hunter mode, even when he's cracking jokes at the bar. At the same time, that brain is full of cracks. Dean's got a massive inventory of losses and failures he heaps onto himself. Everything that goes wrong, he tends to take personal responsibility for. I should have done more. I should have gotten there sooner. I should have died instead of him. That shows up in how he positions himself in every situation as a shield. In a way, Dean's psychological anatomy is the anatomy of a living sacrifice. He sees himself as someone who exists to absorb damage, physical and emotional, and that poisons every choice he makes. When he makes extreme decisions, dangerous deals, accepting cursed marks, diving into realities that'll destroy him, it's almost always to spare someone he loves. And that brings us to one of the most wild transformations in his journey, the Mark of Cain. When Dean accepts that mark, he basically signs a contract that rewires his base code. The mark cranks up strength, endurance, aggression, bloodlust. When he grabs the first blade, it's like every ounce of pent-up hate, every buried pain, and every combat instinct lines up on a single target. Annihilate it. At that point, Dean stops being just a human fighting monsters and becomes almost one of them. His anatomy starts running like some hybrid of hunter and creature, with the mark acting like an energy parasite that demands blood and violence. It's bone-chilling to watch how he starts getting off on fighting and killing under the mark's influence, and it shows how much an outside force can amplify what already lives inside him. But while his body's getting this supernatural upgrade, his mind's drowning. The mark messes with his moods, his impulse control, his empathy. Dean gets colder at times, more explosive at others, and the line between hero and threat gets thinner by the day. The tragic part is he knows it. He clocks that he's becoming dangerous, notices who he's hurting emotionally, but he can't just flip the switch off. The mark's like an addiction carved into flesh and soul, and that makes his whole journey heavier. It's the anatomy of a warrior turning into a weapon. If you catalog Dean's practical skills, you've got a list of things that would make any character look insane on its own. Excellent marksman, knows how to go hand-to-hand with bigger opponents, masters different types of bladed weapons, understands mechanics well enough to keep the Impala always running, knows how to pull off disguises, interrogations, infiltration, tracking, research in old books, symbol work, rituals, exorcisms. He can improvise weapons from motel room junk, turn everyday objects into lethal traps for creatures, and somehow keep a cynical edge through all of it. Add it all up, and his body becomes a multi-purpose platform. Soldier, detective, mechanic, and way too often, the emotional lightning rod for the group. When you start talking about his actual feats, the list gets almost comical. Dean's helped stop the apocalypse, faced the 4 horsemen, leviathans, gods from different pantheons, fallen angels, archangels, top-tier demons, creatures that existed way before humans even walked the earth. In most situations, he's the guy who shows up with 0 cosmic powers, just an improvised plan, an old car, a loaded gun, and the stubborn refusal to accept losing. A lot of his biggest wins don't come because he's stronger, they come because he's more stubborn. He gets his ass kicked, drops, bleeds out, comes back, pushes harder, negotiates, breaks the rules, sacrifices himself. In terms of narrative power, Dean's main skill is absolute refusal to abandon anyone or quit before he's completely out of options. Another weird part of Dean's anatomy is his relationship with death. By any rational measure, he should have been dead and staying that way for ages, but the universe he lives in doesn't seem willing to let him go that easy. He's died in different ways, gotten trapped in time loops, dying over and over, been dragged back by magic, deals, divine intervention. That creates this strange vibe. On one hand, he's completely mortal, he feels pain, ages, gets tired. On the other, there's this weird cosmic gravity that won't let the story just drop him. It's like reality got used to having Dean as a key player on the board, and every time he falls, some force, heaven, hell, or something in between pulls him back into the game. This closeness to bigger forces also shows up in the fact that Dean's a compatible vessel for an insanely high-level angelic being. Even though he rejects that destiny, the simple fact that he's compatible with something that old and powerful says a lot about his metaphysical structure. It's not just about the body surviving, it's about the soul having enough weight not to shatter under that kind of pressure. In a way, it proves Dean's not just some random guy thrown into a cosmic war. His anatomy, physical and spiritual, seems like it was forged over his whole life to carry loads that would crush anyone else. On a parallel track, Dean's emotional anatomy is locked onto one thing: family, especially his brother. Sam is the axis his whole life spins around. Everything, and I mean everything, runs through that filter. He agrees to go to hell, agrees to carry a cursed mark, agrees to practically become a monster, all to try and make sure his brother survives. That means his heart, not the organ, but the symbol, is in constant civil war between love and self-destruction. He cares so much that he puts himself on a collision course with just about everything. The pattern repeats enough that it seems hardwired into his DNA. Faced with any choice between himself and his brother, the answer's automatic. He picks the sacrifice without even thinking. There's also something interesting in his small habits that factor into his anatomy too. Dean eats like garbage when he can, especially junk food, drinks more than he should, gets attached to the car, the rock tapes, the classic guns. All that stuff works like external organs, extensions of who he is. The Impala isn't just a vehicle. It's his mom, his dad, all the road trips, the conversations in the front seat, the laughs and arguments, all wrapped up in metal and chrome. The music he listens to isn't just a soundtrack. It's how he keeps hold of who he still is underneath all the pain and the hunter routine. Every scar, every piece of gear, everything he holds onto tells you something about what he's lost and what he's still trying to protect. Looking at the season he got stuck in Purgatory is almost like a case study in extreme survival. Purgatory is basically a natural lab for supernatural predators, a place where everything wants you dead every second. It's just forest, fog, mud, beasts, and silence. Dean's body goes through a kind of distillation down there. He loses weight, gets lean, faster, more instinctive. He's fighting practically every day, sleeping barely at all, stuck in maximum alert. The way he moves changes, his eyes get sharper, his posture shifts to pure hunter, surrounded by hunters even worse than him. You could say in Purgatory, a lot of stuff that was just symbolic becomes physical. He becomes exactly what he always was on the inside, a warrior who doesn't know how to rest. When he finally gets out, it feels like part of him stayed behind. He misses Purgatory because, in this twisted way, that place fit who he'd become. A guy who doesn't know how to live in peace, who feels more at home in places where it's kill or die, black and white. Back in the real world, with bills and regular people and quiet moments, his head gets too loud. That drives home the point that Dean's body and mind were built for war, not rest. It's like taking a soldier back from years of combat and dumping him in some quiet little town. On the outside he seems fine, but nothing inside lines up right. Then comes the phase where Dean crosses a line he always feared, when the mark and circumstances push him into full demon territory. At that point, his anatomy becomes this blurry line between human and creature. Black eyes, twisted morality, getting off on, causing pain and destruction, it's all turned up to max. But even then, pieces of the old Dean still show through. The way he talks, the acid humor, how he provokes whoever's in front of him, it's all there, just filtered through a malice that doesn't have to fake good intentions anymore. That phase is almost like an X-ray of what happens if you rip away all his moral breaks and emotional locks at once. It's terrifying, but it makes sense with his whole journey. It's the body and soul of a guy who got tortured, used, marked, and then exploded from the wrong pressure valve. If you see Dean through the monster's eyes, the perspective flips in an interesting way. For a lot of them, he's not just another human, he's the horror story that gets whispered through monster communities. The guy who rolls into town, tracks them down, finds the nest, clears it out, and vanishes before anyone can figure out what happened. Picture a vampire telling another. If you see some dude in a black Chevy with a shotgun and the look of someone who's got nothing left to lose, you run. From that angle, Dean's anatomy is the anatomy of a myth, basically an urban legend with legs, the predator of predators, the guy who turned hunting into his life, his fate, and his personal curse all rolled into one. Stacked against other icons, he always seems out of place and somehow inevitable at the same time. Put Dean in the ring with John Wick. Wick might have slicker technique, but Dean's got years of experience fighting enemies that don't bleed like humans and don't play by normal rules. Next to a classic hunter like Van Helsing, Dean's the modern upgrade, less about faith, more about improvisation and pure stubborn refusal to quit. In the end, he's the kind of figure who walks into any crossroads between the human world and the supernatural and just changes the outcome by being there. It's also worth looking at how Dean handles his own fear. He's scared pretty much constantly, but he almost never admits it. The fear shows up in the quiet moments, in the looks he turns away, in conversations he dodges, in memories he locks up tight. In a fight, fear gets recycled into focus. It's like his nervous system learned to use panic as fuel instead of the brakes. That's not healthy, but it works. Long term though, it takes its toll. Meltdowns, breakdowns, rage explosions, moments where he just snaps. And that's where his emotional anatomy shows another layer. He's not a machine. Even though he seems unbreakable, Dean breaks, and when he does, he breaks hard. The difference is, after some time, he pieces himself back together however he can and gets back on the road. At the end of the day, looking at Dean Winchester's anatomy means understanding he's the extreme answer to a simple question. How far can you push a human before he stops being just human? His body proves that pain can be normalized up to a point. His mind proves that massive trauma can get transformed into laser focus and instinct, even if it costs something invisible. His soul proves that even surrounded by cosmic forces, an individual can still try to choose who they want to be, even split between hero, victim, and threat. Dean doesn't shoot lightning from his hands, doesn't teleport, doesn't fly, doesn't regenerate lost limbs, but symbolically, he's in the same tier as creatures that mess with destiny and reality itself. Maybe that's why so many people see themselves in him, because strip away all the demon and angel and apocalypse stuff, and Dean's basically something deeply human, a guy who gets beaten down by life over and over, stacks up scars, screws up, drowns in guilt, but keeps getting back up to protect who he loves. His real immortality isn't the body that climbs back from death, it's the impact this whole way of existing creates. He's living proof that a flawed human being can become the deciding factor in a cosmic war just by refusing to walk away from the fight. And that leaves you with a question that won't shake. Is Dean Winchester just a broken guy pushing forward out of stubbornness? Or has fighting monsters, pain, and destiny so long that he's basically become a force the universe can't erase anymore? Either way, one thing's for sure. As long as he's breathing, the supernatural world's never sleeping soundly again.